Time to elevate. You're running on empty with Matt and Tony.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Running on Empty. I am Matt.
And I'm Tony.
And we're running on empty. And this week, we have got a really awesome show for you.
Yeah, we're going to get into the legacy of Eddie Van Halen and the band Van Halen. And we've got a guest, Michael Hopkins. He's a professional writer. He's a music critic. He's from up here in Northeast Wisconsin. And I think he's got a perspective on this that hopefully our listeners will find somewhat refreshing. All right, folks, we are very excited here to have a real music critic with us, and he's Michael Hopkins, who lives in Neenah, Wisconsin. Is that right, Michael?
That's correct.
Yes, Michael.
I relocated here about 25 years ago from Philadelphia.
All right, that's right. Michael was born in Philadelphia. His book and music criticism appeared in the Philadelphia Inquirer, Philadelphia Weekly, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and he and I both wrote for The Scene, alternative newspaper in Wisconsin, and he's also written for Magnet magazine. Michael has a degree in electrical engineering from Drexel University, which means he's a lot smarter than Matt and me. We're word guys. We're not engineers. His stories have won awards from Glimmer Train and The Mill. His short fiction has been published in Millwork, Pleiades, 365 Tomorrows, Wisconsin People and Ideas, and Moss Piglet. He is the winner of the 2018 Wisconsin Academy of Science, Arts, and Letters Annual Fiction Contest and third place winner in the 2019 contest. And he does live on a small farm up here in Northeast Wisconsin with his wife and their dog, cats, chickens, and of course bees. You got to have bees on the farm.
Right.
Yes. And we brought Michael on to talk about the legacy of Eddie Van Halen and the band Van Halen. And, Michael, let's start off with just Eddie Van Halen as a guitar player. Where would you rank him in terms of the all-time great guitar players?
For me, right, and that's such a subjective thing, I put him up in the top five. I mean, I think he really redefined the craft, and I could mention a little bit about that. But, the people that I love as guitar players are Frank Zappa, Robert Fripp of King Crimson. I love Eric Johnson. And, I consider Eddie Van Halen up there with that group for me that I like to listen to. And it's very interesting because obviously he gets a lot of credit, rightly so, for his tapping that he did.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting because if you talked to him, if he was still around or searched some interview, he really picked that up from Steve Hackett of Genesis, who in the early 70s, in the rock world kind of brought that tapping technique forward. And I'll just tell people listening, if you ever listen to, it's called Return of the Giant Hogweed.
Oh, yeah.
On your Nursery Crime album, the very beginning of it is Steve Hackett tapping. And obviously, Eddie Van Halen took it right to the forefront and rocked it up, revved it up, and is kind of looked at as the originator of that technique. The other thing, it's very amazing to me to see videos of 8 or 10-year-old kids playing guitar and replicating what Eddie Van Halen does.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
He kind of started a whole new generation of guitar players that I can't wait to hear.
Rolling Stone magazine, I mean, I guess they're no great authority, but they put up, all these lists, and they have Eddie Van Halen as number 8 on their list of all-time greats. Now, of course, this is all subjective, but they put Chuck Berry, B.B. King, Jeff Beck, Keith Richards, Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton, and Jimi Hendrix as the all-time. I would agree I would put Jimi Hendrix as number 1.
Yeah.
Just in terms of sheer innovation and, I don't think anyone had ever heard anything like Jimi Hendrix before.
Yeah, I would agree. It's funny when I listen to a list of other guitar players, it's like, oh God, I love Jeff Beck. He was the guy that brought feedback into rock. And I recently have been listening to, I got a CD of Hendrix Woodstock appearance. It's like, I think it's like 80 minutes or something of what he actually did, not the snippets on the album. But yeah, I would agree. They're all great guitar players.
Yeah, just absolutely amazing. Now, we'll talk a little bit about songs. And why don't we get to your story? You're obviously a very successful writer.
Well,
and
get emerging.
Yeah, and apparently, your writing has been influenced in part by the Van Halen song "Panama." So why don't you tell us that story?
Yeah, I would say that, and in fact, I was just asked this recently, is that when I write short stories and screenplays, and I'm referring to my short stories right now, people have asked me, do you purposely try to grab the reader and like propel them along right at the beginning? Because usually they're in my first sentence or first paragraph. I grab the reader and move them along. And there's a couple things. Kurt Vonnegut said advice to short story writers is try to start your story as close to the end as possible. Like leave out a lot of the background detail. But I tell people I imagine myself running a race with the reader, and it's a relay race. And I run that first lap, and I come around the turn, and I'm sweating, I'm huffing and puffing, and I've got that baton, and the reader joins me. And when they read that first sentence of mine, I pass the baton off to them, and they run. And if there was one song that kind of, exemplified that, it's Panama. Panama does that exactly to me. And I tell people, if you want to listen to what I'm trying to achieve, listen to that song.
Wow. That's just incredible. Now, of course, Panama, of course, is the Van Halen with David Lee Roth. And that's kind of like the classic Van Halen band, right? From, I guess, 77 to when did Sammy Hagar join the band? Would that have been maybe 84, 85? Actually, it had to be 85 or 86, I guess, right?
Sounds about right.
Yeah, because the David Lee Roth band, I think their last album was 1984, right, which came out in that year. But you've followed over the years this debate between the Van Halen, David Lee Roth fans, that band, and then the Hagar. And my perception over the years is that the people who think that the David Lee Roth Van Halen band, they seem very hostile toward the toward the Sammy Hagar. And what's your view on that? I mean, I probably prefer the David Lee Roth version of the band, but I thought the Sammy Hagar, the albums 5150 and OU 812, those were not terrible albums.
I like those albums. I thought they were fun.
What's your view on that, Michael?
I think that it's kind of funny. Even David Lee Roth used to call that version Van Hagar.
Right.
I think I've heard him say that. I don't know what's going on with Van Hagar these days, but I think they're the David Lee Roth. I mean, everything was like bright and kind of energetic, and I think very external in their music. It was like fun and party and for the most part. And then I think I was going to say Van Hagar, the Van Halen, Sammy Hagar. It was more introspective, I think. And God, if you could even use this word with Van Halen, a little bit sensitive. Why can't this be love, or right now, or can't stop loving you? These songs, they were more like internal and reflective versus very outgoing. Oh, yeah. But the one thing that ties everything together is Eddie Van Halen's guitar playing. Exactly. And of course, I feel bad, because if you talk about Van Halen, right, you're going to talk about Eddie Van Halen and David Lee Roth, but you forget Michael Anthony on bass and his brother Alex on drums. But they were very consistent too. But I think Eddie's guitar playing is a voice. He's a voice in the band that's consistent between the both of them. But I don't know. What do you guys think? It seems like they went from very external and outgoing to a little bit more introspective. And
Yeah,
I love both versions of it.
yeah, Matt, what's your favorite version of that band?
I actually like both of them. I think that the David Lee Roth, and we had talked about this a little bit offline as well, but the David Lee Roth era of that band really kind of exemplified the glam rock days. And then video came out. I remember, when I started college, all of a sudden there was this thing called MTV, and we're like, wow, what is this? And then Hot for Teacher comes out, and you're like, okay, so they've really kind of embraced this video genre really well. There were still videos, obviously, when Sammy Hagar came in, but to your point that it was a little bit more introspective and internalized than just this. Well, the glam rock, if you will, but I like them for I guess in two different ways. I mean, I like them for each what they brought to the table. But when I was in high school, Van Halen was not necessarily my favorite band. Now, would you consider them heavy metal, or would you consider them hard rock? I mean, heavy metal has obviously changed over the years, but what did they originally come out as?
Me, I would say they were hard rock. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So very, very mainstream. You had other bands in the mix like Def Leppard and the Scorpions and whatnot, and a lot of the other bands that did especially like Poison. They did like the glam look, but I think Van Halen did it best. I think David Lee Roth was like the perfect character for that. But then it's kind of like they started to grow up in the mid '80s. Mm-hmm. I think Sammy Hagar started in '85, and they took it in a new direction, being very respectful to his solo career, but not trying to rewrite or redo what David Lee Roth did. Let's make a slightly new sound, like the guitar stunts. Why Can't This Be Love? The guitar was so different from previous Van Halen sounds, at least in my opinion, was, because like you said, Panama starts and you just get hit with it right away. Hot for Teacher starts with that big drum, at the beginning, but then all of a sudden this new sound comes out, and I remember when I heard it, I'm like, I really like this. So I think it was appropriate for the time. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I just never kind of understood the hostility to the Hagar band. It's I think a lot of people thought that the band kind of sold out in those years.
Yeah.
Right? Because some of those songs were like kind of like romantic love songs. And that's not supposed to be what Van Halen does for some reason. And, I look at it as, I think FM radio was really starting to sink in the 1980s. It was really getting bad. And so when the Hagar stuff came out with Van Halen, for me, it was refreshing on FM radio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Because by the mid 1980s, a lot of the FM rock stations had become like these classic rock stations where you basically were hearing Led Zeppelin, Leonard Skinner, almost all day. And then, in some of those old bands, they were not really putting out that much great new stuff anymore. And so the fact that Eddie Van Halen was kind of able to reinvent the band and come out with something fresh, I thought that was kind of refreshing. Although, again, when I listen to all their albums, I probably give a slight advantage to the Roth band. But having said that, Michael, when you think of Van Halen's albums, and they must have released, 11, 12 studio albums over the years, something like that, give or take a few. Would you put any one of their albums in the truly great must listen to category? Because my perspective is that on pretty much all their albums, there's some great stuff, but I don't know if they ever made one really great album. Would you put any of their records in that category?
If somebody asked me if I could only buy one album of Van Halen, what would I buy? I tell them to buy Greatest Hits, because I think every album's got great songs on it. And one album alone doesn't characterize who they are, all the dimensions of the band. And I think, if you got a Greatest Hits that had both David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar, you'd really be able to hear the whole band. So I think any one album, to me, leaves an understanding of Van Halen incomplete.
Yeah. What would you say about that, Matt?
Say about what? No, I'm kidding. I would say greatest hits, because in order to kind of get the full scope of Van Halen, you really need to get the whole experience, and just limiting yourself. Like, there's a lot of purists out there that only listen to David Lee Roth and that's it, and that's fine. But I would say that, I laughed before, but I think greatest hits is good, because now you get kind of an evolution of the band, if you will. Now, I haven't purchased any Van Halen stuff since my DJ days, but did they record anything with the guy from Extreme?
That's right, Gary Sharon.
Yeah. Because I can't remember if there was any new albums with him on it, or
one. It was called Van Halen 3.
Okay.
It was the only album they did with him. And by the way, I think that album is one of the most underrated albums in their catalog.
Really?
Right? People think, oh, Gary Sharon, what a joke. If you actually listen to that album, it doesn't rank with the best of their work, but it is respectable.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, the critics thought that Gary Sharon was kind of like doing a Sammy Hagar imitation on that album.
That's more of his voice anyway. I mean, I like
exactly.
But the cool part is neither of them tried to duplicate what David Lee Roth brought to it. I don't think thank God there's only one of them. I mean,
See, if I had to mention one album of theirs, it would probably be the one called Diver Down.
I love that one. That's my favorite
but see, my all-time favorite Van Halen song is on that album, and it's the song called Little Guitars. And and it came out in 1982. The FM stations used to really piss me off because they would play that song without playing the 42-second intro to it, which is Eddie Van Halen playing flamenco guitar.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely extraordinary. And then it goes from a 40-second flamenco intro into a typical Van Halen, just rocking drums and bass, and it's got some of David Lee Roth's best vocals of all time. And apparently Eddie Van Halen is playing what's called a mini Les Paul on that song, which is apparently the only song of theirs he ever played this type of guitar on.
Wow.
But that whole album, it's got a mix of covers and original stuff that I find really, really refreshing. So that's what I would put as my number one. Michael, what would you call or say is the impact of that band? Do you think, we know that the Beatles have a legacy, right? They've inspired thousands of bands. The Rolling Stones have that kind of legacy, right? In hip hop, Run DMC has that kind of legacy. What kind of legacy does Van Halen have?
I think, this could be a little bit repetitive, but if you look at when they came out, the song that grabbed people was "You Really Got Me," right? And then that was prefaced with "Eruption," right? His guitar playing. I mean, they put those two together, and that was like around 1977, and it was very disruptive, like I said before, to the rock landscape. So I think their legacy is just the fact that they're just fun. I think, again, not to push like a best of, but you listen to a best of and you're like, God, I didn't realize they had so many hits. Everyone knows who they are. I can tell you some of my favorite bands like King Crimson, where people couldn't name or be familiar with a song, but everybody knows a Van Halen song that means something to them or that they like. So I think their legacy is just they're a fun band that through music were able to connect with a wide range of people. And they're when I think of Van Halen, I just think of a big smile on the band's face. You think through the industrial years in the 80s or whatever with Nine Inch Nails and all the kind of dark stuff, which I love. And even grunge, with all the anxiety and all that kind of stuff, which I love. They just have a big bright smile that they put on everybody's face. And I think their legacy is their fun.
Yeah, and they were one of the last bands to kind of make it the old way, in the sense that my understanding is they had been performing together since around 1972, 73. And then they got discovered, I think, in Southern California in the mid 70s. And so they were like a hard working band for about 4 or 5 years before that first album came out. That's kind of not the way it works today. Right?
Right.
No.
That's right. They did. I think they were in that, this could be wrong, but the Whiskey A Go-Go, that whole scene out there in LA. Yeah. And I believe, and I think I read this when he commented on his death, that Gene Simmons may have produced their first single.
Oh, yeah. I had heard that also.
You could fact check me on that one, or I should. But I think, and he had an eye for talent, and he, if you ever heard him talking, Gene Simmons talking about Rush, in the Rush documentary, when Rush went to, he loves bands that work hard. And I think, to your point, they were a hard-working band for a lot of years before they made it big.
Yeah. Did you ever see them perform live?
I never did.
Did you, Matt?
I have never. No.
No.
There's a lot of artists I've missed. That's one that I'm really regretting because I really wanted to see them.
Yeah, the one thing I learned about them is, when they got big, they started to have these really elaborate concerts with, a super high-tech light show and, a variety of things going on. And apparently they were the band that kind of started what's called the concert rider, where, the band goes into a city and all these things have to be provided. And apparently, from what I've read, their concert riders would include things like, we want 3 bowls of M&Ms and the brown M&Ms have to be separated out, right? Now that sounds like spoiled rock star nonsense, but apparently the reason why they did that was because they claim that if that was done, that meant that all of their technological needs were probably met and they could go on stage confident.
That's funny.
Yeah. And it kind of makes sense, because if you look up YouTube videos of their concerts from the 80s and 90s, they are pretty elaborate. We're talking about the 70s and 80s, Michael, and as we know, and Matt has mentioned the music video, Van Halen was one of the few of the 1970s bands that made the transition into the video era. A lot of those what the first MTV video was called, Video Killed the Radio Star, right?
Yeah.
Right.
How would you account for the fact that a band like Van Halen was able to make that transition?
I think they know how to put on a show.
Yeah.
And their, costumes, their wardrobe, their acting, in their videos. I mean, they put out, like I said, they're really I always think of Van Halen with a big smile on their face, or the band. And I think they did that. They knew how to have fun. When you watch their videos, they look like they're having fun, and then therefore you're having fun watching the videos. And they provided a lot of interesting things, some prurient things. I mean, gosh, we might all get canceled if we start talking about Hot for Teacher, but
let's talk about that one. Let's talk about that one for a minute, right? Matt mentioned it as an important video. Would something like that survive the Me Too era? Because if people can YouTube that video and find it, right? They've got the teacher is kind of like a striptease artist performing in the classroom. It's this kind of like, male adolescent, high testosterone, objectification of women kind of thing going on. I mean, you think they look back on things like that and say, maybe we went over the top on that?
I would think would think no. They would just say we're having fun.
Yeah.
And we were just showing what a lot of kids' fantasies were, or our fantasies. I don't know, not ours.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that they picked some little meme, you'd call it today, and kind of blew it up into a video.
Well, when I teach the rhetoric of rock and roll, I always show the students and both of you should see it if you have not. It's a classic documentary now called MTV Dream Worlds, produced by a guy named Sut Jolly, who's a professor of media studies at University of Massachusetts Amherst, and he tries to make the argument that MTV created this male adolescent dream world that ended up trapping a lot of artists into this kind of like casual misogyny, And MTV tried to sue this guy to prevent the release of this documentary.
Huh.
Yeah. At first, he'd written to them and said, "Look, I'm going to use video clips for my, academic documentary." They said, "Oh yeah, fine, go ahead." Then when they saw what he created, he was making connections between video and sexual assault and so on. Then all of a sudden, they wanted nothing to do with that. And then, they finally decided to leave him alone. But it's got, he's made 3 versions of it. And, he goes out of his way to say it's not that the music is bad, right? The music can be great, but our job as critics is to try to understand the kind of narratives that are coming out of the music and what potential impact, if any, does it have. We spent a lot of time discussing that in class, right? Like what kind of impact does not just popular music, but all popular culture, what kind of impact does it have on the listening audience, right? I mean, you've thought about those kinds of issues, have you not?
Sure. Of course. It's, I guess, when are you exploiting?
Exactly.
And then when does your exploitation encourage other people to do the same? And I think it's you have to watch out. And, I do believe, the road the road of political correctness is getting more and more narrow. And I believe that artists, writers, painters, filmmakers need to step outside those boundaries to conversations going and keep people thinking.
Yeah, I just think that, and I don't know, I tend to blame this on the Rolling Stones. Like if you look at the Rolling Stones history, right, they did some really, really great stuff in the 1960s. It was groundbreaking. They were like this rebellious type of band. And then when the 70s came around, they started with this kind of like hyper sexualized music. And it became like kind of like a lazy trope. You think about it. And, I've seen rock stars who, do interviews and they're asked, like, how do you write songs? And, if you're a working band on the road and you're stuck in hotel rooms, all of a sudden you're saying, what do I write about? Right?
Yeah.
And so if there are like these already existing tropes out there, she's hot, she's this, she's that. Okay. I can do that. I can write about that. And, especially when we're in a time period where, after we left the 60s, the music became, would you agree, a little bit less political?
Oh, yeah, I think so, too. It became more, not superficial, but it became more, less, more about making people happy and having fun than challenging how people think.
Yeah, exactly.
And you make a blanket statement like that about anything, and a lot of people, including me, if I think about it, would be like, "Oh gosh, that's not true." But maybe as a generalization, it is. I think a danger with Van Halen a little bit, or something like that video, is when people will then, if that's so dominant, such a dominant thing burns into your brain that you may start looking at their other songs and thinking they're all like that. Like, again, one of my favorites, Panama or Running with the Devil, right?
Yeah.
Oh God, it's a Satan song. It's like, it's not. It's all about life on the road, and if you look at the lyrics, he says, I'm living at a pace that kills. And this is to your point, like this is what he's doing when he's on the road, they're on the road. And I love the lyric, he says, I got no love, no love that you'd call real. And I ain't got nobody waiting for me when I get home. Right. So you can think of Running with the Devil as like, yeah, I'm running with the devil, But then you look at it and it's to your point, he's on the road, he's in a bus or whatever, and he's having a moment, when maybe, he's just thinking, I'm kind of lonely in terms of long-term relationships.
And this is such an important point. I was watching David Lee Roth's interview that he did with Joe Rogan. It's actually a pretty good episode. They spoke for almost 3 hours.
Wow. I saw that also, by the way.
Right. And so remember the part where Rogan says he thinks that the Hagar version is like shopping mall crap. And David Lee Roth says, look, it's just a different vibe.
Yeah.
He's like, Sammy was into love. Right? If you look at the Van Halen songs in the Sammy Hagar period, it's this very idealistic, very like pro-love kind of song. I mean, that's the general kind of theme coming out, right? But the David Lee Roth version is really suspicious, right? Ain't talking about love.
Yeah.
Right.
Right? That's it's almost like 180 degrees.
Yeah.
And I think that away from each other. And I think that's kind of like what shook up the David Lee Roth fans when Sammy came on board, right? That the band had become more, sentimental, and hard rock bands are not supposed to be sentimental. Well, why not?
Right.
Well, I think part of it was an answer to some of these other like serious rock ballads going on. I mean, you had the
Right.
Scorpions, "Still Loving You." You had Europe, "Carry." I mean, you all these slow, powerful rock ballads. And Sammy Hagar goes, "Well, yeah, I think we can do that too." And they did it in their own way. "Love Comes Walking In," and "Why Can't This Be Love?" I mean, there's definitely a theme there. But I think that was really just their answer to what else was going on, and they did it in the Van Halen way.
Absolutely. Were you surprised, Michael, that Eddie Van Halen never really made solo albums?
I
Because I mean, a guy with that much guitar talent, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say surprised, but I would love to hear a solo album. Like his guitar solo on Thriller. Or it would be interesting. But and I don't know enough about the dynamics of the band, but maybe he wasn't. I don't know if he was the songwriter. Gosh, I should know this, but maybe a little bit surprised. But maybe he felt comfortable kind of doing what he did, having his voice through his guitar come out, within a group. Saying, hey, somebody else can kind of set somewhat of the direction through the lyrics. And I'm there with you, and my voice through my guitar is going to really amplify that.
And you mentioned his work with Michael Jackson. I mean, that was on the song "Beat It." Is that right? Isn't that what he played guitar on?
Yes,
I believe that was the one, right? I think so. Yeah, with that soaring guitar riff.
Yes,
right? And that became almost like an instant classic.
Right. I think I remember seeing some award show where the producers of that record got, a Grammy or something, and who they thanked was Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah, just incredible. So why don't we maybe talk a little bit about our favorite Van Halen song? So you have mentioned Panama. Is there, and what would be some other of their songs that you think, Michael, are especially noteworthy? So
to me, I like Panama. I think that would be up there in my top 3. And I already mentioned Running with the Devil I like.
Yeah.
Because again, that driving kind of song. And here's a funny thing that I didn't realize until I was starting to think about it a little more. But when you look at Panama, the song was about a lot of people. It's got some suggestive lyrics in it. Mm-hmm. But it was basically David Lee Roth was in Las Vegas and saw a car race, and there was a car called the Panama Express, and he wrote the song Panama. So it really is about a car. And then at one point when the things kind of settle in the song a little bit, that you hear a car engine revving in the background, and it's Eddie Van Halen's Lamborghini that they put a mic to.
Oh, wow.
So, and then when I look at Running with the Devil, which might be my number 2 song, I realized in the beginning of that, there's car noises again, the very beginning of it. And they're slowed down or whatever. And then again, I found out that the band, again, mic'd up their own cars and incorporated it into the song. So maybe there's something with me and Van Halen and cars. I'm not really a car guy, but those two, come up at the top of my list. And then for me, number 3 is always going to be You Really Got Me. Even though they didn't write that was the song that I first heard them and was kind of like they grabbed and pulled forward with.
Wow. Matt, do you have a top 3?
My top one is Eruption. When I heard that, I was just like, what is this? I had never heard anything like it before. And so that kind of kicked off my love of Van Halen. And the whole thing with the hammer-ons, I mean, that that was just a technique that I had never seen before. And I'm like, wow, this is like, I didn't even know guitars could do this. And then I would have to go, because I was a disc jockey back then. So I played a lot of mainstream stuff. My second one was Jump, because I got everybody to dance to it. So that's just because it was part of my job. And then because I went to school for being a teacher, I really liked the song Hot for Teacher, but primarily for the one line is I don't feel tardy, because I used to use that. I used to use that in school. But, I just thought they were fun songs. And I did, back in that time, I wasn't looking for anything with like a deep, message or whatever, and I remember Jump got, panned quite a bit because of the whole like possible connection to suicide, which I didn't see. I didn't think of it that way. But that one was one, if I'm going to play a hard rock song during a DJ set, Jump would pack my dance floor. So I'd have to say Eruption, Jump, and Hot for Teacher would be mine.
Wow. I'd have to put, I mentioned little guitars earlier because I just love that flamenco intro and then leading that into this kind of hard rock. And it's also one of their more mature performances, lyrically and in other ways too. I would put one from the Hagar era, the song Dreams.
Oh, that's a good tune.
Yeah. I just think that's got just really one of the great rock melodies of all time. And I remember at the time thinking that, okay, if this is the Hagar version of Van Halen, okay. But then, like I said earlier, I just never sensed that their entire albums were at that level. There would be great moments. But of course, maybe that's too much to expect, right? I also think the song Jamie's Cryin' from the first album is really a classic. I love that it's got almost like a very upbeat instrumental with almost like a little soap opera going on. And that's one of those songs that you could see someone like Michael, a writer, like making a screenplay out of that song. All right. And I think David Lee Roth at the time wrote most of the lyrics, right? And and actually, to tell you the truth, you talk about the influence of, say, podcasts. It wasn't until I saw that David Lee Roth interview with Rogan that I realized what a serious band Van Halen were. Like, I used to think, okay, you got a great guitar player. He's one of the all-time greats. But I used to think, as what Michael suggested, this is an upbeat, happy, party band, right? And it turned out, listening to that podcast interview, that they were like deeply connected to neighborhoods around Los Angeles, right? And Roth took his lyric writing very seriously. And so, it's nice to know when you discover something about a band that you kind of didn't expect,
Yeah.
It's interesting because I saw that Joe, and it's making me want to re-listen to that or rewatch it, is with the Joe Rogan and David Lee Roth episode. He's a very serious guy.
Yep.
And very deep thinker in terms of, he kept talking about doing this and doing that, trying to add complexity into your life, to work new muscles and new brain cells. And he's a pretty amazing guy, for sure.
Yeah. I think all the members of that band, were like four really unique individuals. And of course, Alex Van Halen, the drummer, has got to be one of the great rock and roll drummers of all time. I mean, that he doesn't often get enough credit, but his drumming, especially when you watch them live, I've only seen it on, say, YouTube performances. He's, right up there with the classic rock drummers of Keith Moon and Charlie Watts of the Rolling Stones, and just all of the greats that we mentioned. Is there a modern Van Halen, Michael? Is there one band today that you would put in that level, one hard rock or metal band?
It's kind of an interesting question. And so the off the top of my head, the answer is no. But, I'm a little bit older now, and it just feels like in the music world, bands like Van Halen and lots of other bands, they're not around right now. And this is again, maybe showing my lack of connection with current culture, but I don't see a lot of bands right now that in 30, 40 years, people are going to be looking back and listening to, at least not bands that have been around for quite a while. Now, again, we'll end this podcast and I'll kick myself and say,
Right.
oh, I should have mentioned, I should have thought of that. There are, but nothing jumps to mind,
Well,
in terms of Van Halen.
The one guy that I would put in Eddie Van Halen's category, although he's kind of been around for a long time now too, is Jack White of the White Stripes.
Yeah.
And his guitar playing is phenomenal. I don't know if it's as phenomenal as Eddie Van Halen, but he's right up there. How much of this do you think, Michael, is the way music is produced now? I mean, when you and I were growing up, there were groups that produced the 45 single, right? And there might be like the one hit wonder. Haven't we kind of gone back to that with music streaming? Like a lot of bands now are known for maybe one song that gets 80 million downloads on Spotify, but very few bands now are known for entire albums.
Right. And if you, so I'll pick somebody like Billie Eilish, who I like.
Yeah.
I really like. I like her work, and I believe it's her brother, that.
Yeah.
But I don't know if she spent 5 years playing clubs, or did she just get one hit on, a million hits on a YouTube video? And, that's the way things are right now. I mean, you don't have to knock on doors to sell vacuum cleaners. You can go on, Instagram and create a business. So a lot of the models for business have changed. And in the music business, I think that's the same. So I wouldn't discredit her for learning how to use that new business model and become successful. But I think the way that people gain success right now is different. And I think there is something fundamental about, slogging it around like Van Halen did for 5 or 6 years, when, they had small local followings, perhaps, to being able to hop on YouTube. What would be interesting is if no one knew who Van Halen was, and today they appeared, how would they fare in this new business model of Instagram and YouTube?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like what we're witnessing in pop music these days is kind of like the benefits and the shortcomings of democracy. And what I mean by that is anyone can get the GarageBand software program and within a few hours produce something that can be uploaded this is what Billie Eilish did. It's what Grimes did, and many, many others. So that's democracy, right? Anybody who can get the technology can do this. But the downside of it is, you're going to get a lot more crap. Right? Yes. So, So like in the old days of pop music, the producers, the record labels, they served as kind of like a gatekeeper, right?
Right.
And,
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And now
it's a little bit. It's kind of funny, this conversation with us, right? It's a little bit like saying, I had to walk 5 miles to school.
Exactly.
All you need to do is go down to the living room and turn your computer on.
Yeah.
I think it's just a different world right now.
No, and I mean, I think it's beautiful though, right? That any kid can go into their bedroom with this program and make music, right? And some of it's going to end up as Billie Eilish, right? Because that's essentially what she did, and she's remarkably talented. But a lot of it is going to end up as pure, unadulterated garbage.
And I think it's interesting because if you look at that, what we're talking about right now, if you look at the punk scene, there were a lot of bands that they said, I'm not going to get a record contract.
Right.
So the hell with it. I'm just going to start my own record label.
Yeah.
And I'll release my own stuff. So I think that kind of entrepreneurship, that really typified a lot of punk bands, you could maybe connect that to what's going on today. And say, it's a way of somebody taking control of their life and taking control of their art and saying, I'm not going to wait around for somebody else to tell me that I'm good or to promote my own stuff. I'm just going to do it. And you see a lot of that in the writing world with self-publishing. A lot of very successful self-published writers who have said, I'm not going to wait for a book deal from one of the top 5 publishers. I'm going to do it. So maybe there is a kind of connection, that you could link back what's going on with these people, the folks that are doing this kind of YouTube, Instagram stuff with the American spirit. pioneers.
That
I'm
might be
taking charge.
Yeah, that might be a good way to start bringing our conversation to a close. Speaking of writing, what are your latest writing projects, Michael?
Okay, it's I'm always writing, and I focus on short stories and screenplays, and so I just keep writing short stories, and so I don't. When you say what's your latest project, there is always one story that I'm working on, and I will say that I started a novel, but I have a problem. Is that I keep getting interrupted with ideas for short stories, which I can't write. And I think, well, I could get this done in 2 weeks instead of the 8 months it's going to take me to finish my novel. So I'm focusing on that. I have written a screenplay for one of my short stories. It's called Full Count. In fact, Tony, I'll send it to you. I'll send it to
please
you
do.
to read
Cool.
because you can't get it online. It was in a literary journal. But I have a full-blown screenplay for that I'm floating around. And I also have a friend who wrote a book called Waves. And we wrote a television pilot for that. So they're kind of floating around trying to find a home. But for me, I'm working on short stories primarily. And, I get a fragment of something stuck in my head. And then I realize this is something that I can't not write about. So that's what I'm working on.
Now, do you force yourself to write every day, or do you kind of like get up in the middle of the night and like, oh, I got an idea, I better write this down? Is there a technique that you follow to write?
So the first part of that is that I'll get a fragment, something I see, something I hear, something that happens, and it'll come into my head. It's something I start thinking about. I get a lot of these fragments, and some of them disappear, some of them don't. So the ones that don't are the ones that I wind up turning into a story. So how do I write? The thing about writing is, to me, there's two parts to the process. There's kind of thinking about what you're going to write about, kind of like fantasies or dreaming, and not dreaming like you go to sleep and you wake up and you've got an idea. And then there's sitting down and hitting keys on a keyboard, and I think they're both distinctive parts of the process. So I would say that I start to feel ill if I'm not writing 4 hours a day every day.
Wow.
Wow.
I had a day job for 37 years, which I don't do anymore. I'm fortunate that I can do that. So I would say that I make myself do it, but it's not like I'm forcing myself. It's almost like I can't not do it. I enjoy doing it so much. I start to feel mentally unbalanced if I'm not doing it, in a way. So it's just something that I do. But I do tell people when I'm out cutting the grass, I'm writing. When I'm taking a drive to, pick something up at the store, I'm writing. If I'm painting my deck, I'm writing because I'm constantly churning ideas in my head. And, I'm very into, mindfulness and being in the moment. And, just doing whatever it is that you're doing in that moment. But I find that I'm constantly writing.
Well, that's totally cool. And we would love to have you on again. It doesn't always have to be after a rock star dies.
Yeah,
right?
I have opinions on everything. Hey, can
Exactly.
Can I mention one thing about Eddie Van Halen?
Yes, please do.
A parting shot. So it's funny, as I was reading, he was born in Amsterdam, and then his family settled in Nijmegen, Holland.
Wow.
Or Netherlands. And my mother-in-law was born in Nijmegen. So she's passed. But so Eddie Van Halen and I are 2 or 3 degrees separated from each other.
I was going to say, where does Kevin Bacon fit into that?
I know. That's funny.
Somewhere.
So
Wow.
thank
Michael,
you, by the way, for having me on. It's really
absolutely
fun.
Thank you.
It's just fun, and anytime.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Michael. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks,
and
Michael.
Please do send us that story.
Wow, Tony, that was an awesome interview. That was really,
Sure
really
was.
fun.
It sure was. I think Michael has got some really good insights about music and about. I was really impressed by what he had to say about writing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And,
well,
yeah,
I'm trying to write a book, but I've been working on it 3 years. I don't write for 4 hours every day.
Well, I mean, I tell you, I consider myself a pretty hardworking person, but I don't sit down 4 hours a day to write.
That's
You know,
discipline. That's discipline, dedication. Yeah.
I really appreciate that. And as he said during the interview, the song Panama has influenced his writing. And so why don't we close out today, Matt, on Van Halen and Panama?
Yeah, let's do some Panama, and then we won't be coming back after the song, everybody. But enjoy the end of the show, and thanks so much for tuning in. We appreciate everybody out there. We're also going to have in the notes and everything down below. Check out, we've got links to some of the Van Halen songs and some of the other things we talked about in the show. So thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. Thanks so much, Tony, and we'll see you next time. Stay elevated, everybody.
We're running a little bit hot tonight. I can barely see the road from the heat coming on. Reach down between my legs, ease the seat back. She's running, I'm buying, right behind it, real deal me now. Got the feeling, but I was hearing, busy popping, ain't no stopping now. Panama, Panama,
You're running on empty with Matt and Tony.